What's up, guys? Welcome to Wasted Space, and we are back in Space Engineers and back with the cable car design, but with a cable car / tube design. This is essentially all based off that same thing, but with a further iteration of exactly what it does and how it works. So we have just boarded the train and taking part in that minute wait, the same as the previous video, at one of the 4 stations we've got set up here. And so we'd come on, you'll also notice that there are a couple of control panels. Those are going to be relevant a little bit further into the video when I explain, because kind of as I suggested, I managed to make this work now, both with stations, multiple stations, but also turning corners, sort of. And partly this is thanks to a huge amount of really cool comments and suggestions I had on my last 2 videos, both through Reddit and through YouTube. I would go and thank some people, but honestly there's been so many good ideas, so many different people, and I just haven't had a chance to try them all. I'm sure most of them work. So thank you very much, guys, for putting those comments out there, giving me some solutions. Some of this is my own work, some of this is your work, so thanks a lot for that. But yeah, this is what we've come down to. So we are just leaving the station as before on the first leg of our journey. Now, one of the things that has changed with this is I've had to change the cart design slightly, because it turned out it wasn't quite as stable as I'd like. The only thing I did was I put the wheels the other way around. So those 2 wheels you can see there, they used to curve inwards towards the centre of the body, and they now curve out. Let's jump out this seat for a second, check back on. No, check back on, dampers on, thank you. Yeah, so you can see up here, what we've had to do here is just span those out, so they're now really close to the corners, and that's made the whole thing nice and stable. This will remain stable for pretty much its entire journey, and the other thing I changed to make it nice and stable was to fiddle with the damping settings on the wheels. So if we go down to all the wheels in here, of which there are plenty and they're all funky colours, you can see they're all set with this 100% damping, and that's really important. I found that without that activated, the whole thing wobbles around far too much, in particular when we come into this bit that's up ahead here. So we're just going into my methodology for turning a corner. Now, admittedly, it is not turning a corner. It's kind of cheating, but basically we are going to fly through this gap and into, as you've probably guessed, a box on a rotor. Now in here, the same thing that detects when we're in stations detects the end wall, stops the ship, and I've got a sensor on the end. So what's now happened is that sensor has started the whole thing turning, and it is going to turn through 90 degrees. If I just drop down underneath and show you what's down there. I'm trying to be a bit quiet with the keyboard this time as well. Notice how noisy it is. So down here, literally just a rotor with a very strict limit, 90-degree limit, so it can only go point in those 2 directions, and a timer block hooked up to that sensor, which after the sensor detects something in there, and obviously that something needs to be a small ship, it will trigger this turn. And as you can see, after 90 degrees it stops. The ship inside sort of wobbles a tiny bit, but not very much, and that was the damping change and how that played out. Without the damping on 100%, the thing would wobble quite violently at this point. The timings I could make a little bit tighter. Obviously this is still sitting in here now and waiting for that minute timer, the same timer I was using in the last video, to run out, at which point, as it just has, it's going to change the engines, and as you can see, these wheels on the pistons actually navigate this gap quite nicely. They just, you go straight through, and we're off now. That's obviously the corner turning side of things, and the way this will work is that corner is going to stay pointing this direction now, and that's where the car is, so that's fine. No matter where the car is, the corners will always be pointing in the right directions. The other thing I've added, which we're just driving through here, is separate stations, and I'm not going to show with this one, but I can kind of demonstrate how things work with this one. So this is the blue station, if you hadn't guessed, and in all of the stations I have blue and red control panels, and if I go and hit this button, the red lights are going to come on, and what's going to have happened at the red station, if I press the blue one as well, I'll be able to show you here, is that's turned the blue lights on, and the blue lights have gone on at all the stations. You can see there's 2 blocks have just dropped down into the ceiling. And there is an extra sensor on the top of the car now, so we're going to catch back up with this. In fact, I'm not going to catch back up with it. What I'm going to do is I loaded this map up in Creative so I could actually give people a really clear look at exactly how I built stuff by just randomly pasting it out here, so people can have So on the top here we have another sensor pointing upwards, very tight field, designed to detect blocks and blocks only, tied to this timer. And the entire track now has a groove cut in the ceiling. So at any point it sees an item in that groove, and I've got the sensor height just enough so that this is fine, it won't detect those, but anything lower than that it'll pick up. As soon as it sees something in that groove, it will stop and wait at whichever station that was. So hasn't quite reached the corner yet. That means I'll run up to the red station, and while we wait for him to show up and navigate this next turn on there, I can show you a little bit about how I made this. Not hugely complex, but as you can see, the red light is on over here to tell me that the red station blocks are down, which they are. It's not hugely complex, but it was a bit of a brain mess to try and get your head around how everything needed to be labelled and so on, because all stuff is built at different stations, obviously. So if we go in here, we have a bunch of groups. Red station stop, which is the pistons, and red station stop lights, which is a group that contains all of the lights at the various stations. And you see, I've actually gone through and named them all so that they were easy enough to locate. But that contains all those lights at the station, and the same is true for the blue station stop and the blue station stop lights. And these are all obviously blue, and the red ones are red. And then down the bottom, if we go all the way down here, we have a red station response and a blue station response. Exactly the same thing, just one for each station. And all that does is reverse the piston to make it either go up or down, and turn that group of lights on or off. Quite straightforward. But therefore, once this is completed its turn, or almost done, it means that whichever station you're at, you can now order the station you want to go to. So from here, it's gonna come along, it's gonna stop at the red for me, we're gonna get on board, and then I could tell it to take me to the blue station by going and activating the blue over here to turn the blue light on to tell me that the blue station is activated, and of course now the red station is also activated. And once this thing has finished its turn, you coming, my friend? Come on. Yeah, I do think I need to change those two timers to just a little bit faster. I'm not sure how much faster that's going to be. What, 10 seconds difference, I think? Just hangs around in there a little bit too long. But yeah, this is going to go along. That sensor on the top, which is peering upwards, is not going to see those. They're too high up. But it is going to see these. And I'm pretty sure this isn't going to stop in quite the right place. I haven't... The ones in the red station here, I haven't tested to be sure. Oh, okay. I take that back. It's going to stop in exactly a perfect place. The only sort of flaw with this system, or two flaws I would say. One is you have to remember to turn off the red station unless you want it to get stuck again as it tries to leave. You can override that, but it's a good idea. The easiest solution is just to turn it off like that. And if we now... This is the second issue, and that is simply that because it doesn't know which direction it was coming in when it stopped at the station, it also doesn't know, therefore, which direction to go. So I've kind of made that a player choice. You can just hit one of these buttons, and these buttons will just send you in whichever direction you've pushed. And you combine that with, let's jump in the cockpit. There we go. Combine that with what that sensor on the top does. So if we find the... Okay, so we've got the forward and reverse sensor responses. They're exactly the same as in my previous video. I haven't had to change them to make any of this work, which is one of the nice parts of it. So if you're interested in how that side of things work, I go into the detail of that in my first tube system video. But we have this station sensor response now, which is looking upwards. And yeah, literally all it does is it turns all of the thrusters off. Okay, so none of the timer blocks are activated, none of the rest of the system is going or doing anything. It just stops all the thrusters so that you can then manually start them again. And the reason that this is kind of necessary for my system is all of the sort of activities in here are done on a timer, and that timer works off the idea of reversing whichever direction it's been. So if one side's been turned on, it'll then turn the other side on. It just flips them over, which works great for these corners because of course it's driven in forwards, and what it needs to do is drive out backwards, so that's perfect. And it works great for the stations at either end because of course it goes up to those stations, and then the next thing it needs to do is go back the way it came. The only place it doesn't quite function as you want is at these separate stations. So yeah, as I said, 10-second change to that timer, methinks. It's just about to set off, aren't we? Here she comes. Yeah, and this will now, once again, travel the whole way down here, and once it reaches those blue markers, which are right the way down this end, you should be able to come down here and now see that because I toggled that blue station switch, these are now down in the position where they'll get toggled. All the blue lights are on, and that car would now stop and wait at this station until someone boarded it. I'm actually going to turn that off so that all the lights have gone off, and we will just quickly go and have a look at the two ends, the two main stations. And this is primarily just to show you that I wasn't lying, they all do work. So you can be at this end of things, down this side, and those same buttons are duplicated here, and they have exactly the same result. So you turn that on, there'll be two blue lights on here, but there will also now be blue lights on over there, and at that end. So that all seems to function very nicely. And of course, if you don't have any of these stations activated, so if all the lights are off, that thing will continually go backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And I've left it running for about an hour and a half while I was building other things. I've started working on a completely automated cargo transport, basically, which is going to go over there, as you can see the beginnings of, using a very similar technique to this, but with some extra stuff on top. And I just left it running while I was doing that, and I came back and it was in exactly the same sort of angle and positioning as I'd left it in. It just goes back and forth, super stable. So yeah, I hope you found that interesting, guys. Again, this is kind of further developments. How can we keep using sensors? How can we keep using timer blocks to add more functionality to make stuff more autonomous? I'd be really interested to hear any comments you've got, any suggestions you've got for new stuff, because obviously a lot of what you're seeing here is driven from suggestions from people. I think that's awesome. I really like it. And on top of that, obviously there's a few other bits with this that I might end up coming back and doing a version 2 where it works in a slightly different way. We don't have, for example, these blocks in the ceiling. What I could do, so to make it truly autonomous but then not have the station selection, is have on the bottom you would have the sort of sensor for the reversing when it reaches the end of the track, and the sensor for reversing when it goes into a corner, and then on the top you would have the sensor for stopping at the stations, and it would simply, that sensor for stopping at the stations would turn all of the engines on, which activates the inertial dampers, stops the cart where it is, and so you've almost got two different sensors at that point, completely dedicated to two different things. Again, it still might be plagued with the whole doesn't know which way it's going problem, but I still think concept's sound, and hopefully an interesting one for you guys. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you found it interesting, please hit that like button. Please even consider subscribing. Really helps me and the channel out. And I will see you next time.